Well, it was Carabao Cup game against Newcastle United, and well, things didn't exactly go according to plan. Welcome back to the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do consider doing so I can try and reach my target of 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And also don't forget to click the bell for notifications and like the video if you like it. Now, in terms of the Newcastle game, we've drawn 0-0 with Newcastle before, and it's difficult really, because when you're in a cup game with the squad that we have, it's not the biggest squad. Obviously, we've learnt this season that we're a little bit thin in terms of squad depth, so it was always going to be a difficult one for Patrick Vieira. Does he put out the strongest side possible and risk getting injuries going into the Premier League, or does he put out a younger side, perhaps some might say a weaker side, but then run the risk of losing the game? Well, I think he kind of gambled for the latter. He brought in he made 6 changes, and including leaving Zaha at home, and it was a game that I think Newcastle also had many changes to their squad as well. I think they were also thinking ahead to the Premier League, and while some people wanted to have a good cup run to bolster the situation in the Premiership, I think that it was probably the best decision to make, because we are, as I said before, thin on the ground in terms of squad depth, so it's a good idea that we were a little bit cautious in the cup run. But things didn't exactly go according to plan. For example, the game wasn't necessarily one of those games that was going to light you on fire. It wasn't necessarily a high tempo game. Newcastle had the vast majority of the chances in both halves, really. We did have a couple of chances here and there, but in general, I think Newcastle had the lion's share of it. And and at times they looked quite fluid, and they looked quite compact, and they were working well. I think our defence worked quite well considering the changes that we've had. We had Luca in midfield, who did okay at times. Perhaps not his best performance, but I think he worked okay in the middle there. And I think in general we had an okay game. It wasn't necessarily the best game that we've ever played, unfortunately. However, as these things sometimes go, when you have two slightly weaker sides playing each other, it ended up at full time 0-0. Now that meant in the new rules that it goes straight to penalties. There is no extra time, and whether you're an England fan or a Palace fan, penalty shootouts are always a little bit nerve-wracking for you, and unfortunately things didn't go our way there either. Luca missed a penalty, which is really strange considering that he was one of our penalty talisman at one point. He missed a penalty, and we also had another penalty saved from Malcolm Ebiowei, who was the last guy to take the penalty for us. Now, I'm not going to have a go at anybody who takes penalties, because it's one of those things where sometimes it's a bit of luck, sometimes it's just something that doesn't work quite right, it doesn't feel right, and it doesn't go in the back of the net. So, and I'm not going to have a go at Malcolm Ebiowei or Luca for them missing their penalties. I think that is a very difficult situation. They put themselves forward for it, and unfortunately they've got to take the disappointment that goes along with it. Patrick Vieira said that that Malcolm Ebiowei is going to learn from this experience, and that they're supporting him, which I think is fantastic. I think he needs that support so he doesn't lose any of his confidence that he has. But it also means that we lost the game on penalties, so we are now out of the Carabao Cup, which I think isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think that we need to concentrate on the Premier League more than anything else. I think we need to be working our way towards a European place at some point, maybe this season, maybe the next. And I think that we also need to be aware of our squad limitations at the moment, and try to use that squad as wisely as possible. So I think overall, not necessarily the worst thing to ever happen to us, but it was a disappointing result nevertheless. However, as always, the floor is open to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts as always on the game, and whether you think that we should have put out a weakened side, or should I say a side that's not our first team, or do you think we should have just stuck with the team that we had and let the situation work out as it was? So I'd love to hear your comments down below as always, and I'll see you next time.